Hello buddy, it's Warren here with another bit of Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the lovely rolling fields of Gorgazan, playing as the Forces of Chaos against the Forces of the Empire. And as you can see by some of the unit icons here, we're going to be doing some big brain plays here. Rolling with chosen great weapons against one of the most powder heavy factions in the game. Not a bright idea by most metrics, I believe. However, in this situation, I really did want to give them a shake and figured maybe if we can screen those chosen well enough, they can grind out the game in the long term. Empire, generally, you'll see a lot of black powder, and you will see at least some heavy cavalry. That tends to be the core mix of Empire damage dealing. And as long as I can screen and pressure all that cavalry, all the light skirmish cavalry and guns adequately, I figured, well, the Chosen should be able to hack their way through any chaff infantry that my opponent may have brought, and then they're going to be able to drag any knights into the muck. Demi-Griff knights are not going to be a super good counter to Chosen with great weapons. Any lower-end Empire cav is going to be absolute trash against Chosen with great weapons. But at the same time, they are a bit quicker at cleaving through infantry than halberds are. So that is what the core of our army here is. We're going to be rolling with Kolek as our Lord because I did want a bit of extra anti-large punch. He's, of course, got Stand or Die. He's got Lord of the Storm, as well as Foe Seeker, so he's in there, able to flex around, able to clobber some nasty knights, or perhaps annoying single entities. Out on the periphery, we do have some Marauders to screen our flanks. A single Chaos Sorcerer here in the back mounted on his pony. He's a Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows. Nothing much to be said for him. He's got Penumbral Pendulum, of course, to delete those lines of Empire guns. We've got the Enfeebling Foe to help us in key fights, and Melkoth's Miasma to potentially snare enemy cav. For our screening force, we've got 5 Marauder Horsemen, 2 on this end with some Hounds, as well as 3 units on this end. And these guys are really there just to counter Pistoliers, screen those out, screen out Outriders, Outrider grenades, that sort of thing, and otherwise dive into backline and pressure it. For my opponent, he is rolling with the Forces of the Empire, and it's a bit of a motley crew here at the front line. A Warrior Priest is propping them up. We've got the Sigmar's Sons. The Warrior Priest, of course, coming in with his full kit, I believe, no Banner of Eternal Flame, which is a little surprising. Well, I shouldn't say surprising, but it's surprising that that wasn't brought rather than say Divine Power, if anything. Divine Power, not a particularly good item. Benediction, though, excellent, very underrated ability, though obviously kind of useless with Sigmar's Sons, but good to keep these greatswords in the fray, good to help these spearmen and state troops. Soulfire and Hammer of Sigmar there, both good buffs. Besides that, front line mix with some spearmen, mixed with Sigmar Sons, Flagellants, some guns behind that, silver bullets, and handguns here, making up a decent firing line, and not one that's sort of overcommitted. There's not too many guns here, there's just enough to pour on some fire, and hopefully be screenable by the mixed force of Demigriffs and Empire Knights here in the back. And you can see these halberds have in fact been chevroned up a bit, perhaps with some leftover money. So while certainly not on the level of, say, Royal of Griffites, they are a decent force there. Up in the sky, Karl Franz does survey all below him. He's got stand your ground as well as hammer, as well as the hammer, the good old Call Raz. Personally, I think it would be a bit of a better investment to bring hold the line over stand your ground, but in a burst, this can be good. Helps Franz's playstyle. An Amethyst Wizard here on the ground who has Fate of Buno, which in this rare instance, normally I would not say it's a worthwhile pick against Chaos, but in this rare instance it can actually be good because there's Chosen for it to target, Soulblight to debuff armor, not bad for helping those Flagellants and Sigmar Sons do some work, and then we've got Spirit Leech to chip away at my key troops, Lords. 2 Outriders here on the flank immediately do start skirmishing away with my Marauder Horsemen. The Horsemen pouring in, looking to get some picks, chip off some models, because ultimately if these Horsemen die and there's all the enemy melee army left, I can still win that game, as long as they died to get rid of this skirmish cavalry. Whereas if my opponent loses skirmish cav, it's going to be very difficult to grind out the main fight. Now, unfortunately, these Marauder Horsemen are sort of wavering and routing. Their leadership not the best, and they really don't hold up to repeater handguns, so some of them are going to be fleeing there. And of course, that infantry screen moved up quickly enough to zone. But we are collapsing here on the flanks and looking to pressure in on this infantry. As you can see, my opponent having a hard time getting past the Marauders to get good shots at Chosen with great weapons. Over here, Karl does have a bit of a slip up, gets a little too close to the Marauder Horsemen, and when you don't have healing magic, because my opponent didn't bring life here, that's a problem. You do not want Karl Franz to be taking fire early on. He's already lost about 300 or so HP. Certainly not a huge amount of loss, but it is something and it's not ideal. Now over here, Penumbral Pendulum is going to be going down. We're going to be seeing it cleaving through these unfortunate silver bullets and handguns. My opponent did see it coming in on the silver bullets, so it just clips some of the ones at the back, one of them exploding into gore, and these handguns, though, right on the path of destruction, scything through them and sending men flying. So just unfortunate there that they got caught out. Granted, my opponent did dodge the hit a little better than I'd hoped, because he pivoted some of the guns last second, but we did get some good damage in there, some juicy hurt. In the meantime, Marauder Horsemen here overrunning the Outriders. Of course, they can fire 360 while Outriders cannot, so this sort of pressure makes the Outriders, puts the Outriders in a really ugly position. And if they get charged, they really start bleeding models. In the pits, in the meantime, Chosen are going to start pouring in. Now, this is a bit of a bad angle of attack. The fact that the Marauders were faster than the Chosen means the Marauders got stuck in a lot sooner. And the Chosen are kind of getting clumped up here. And I'm trying to swing them around, trying to get some width here. But the Chosen are not getting ideal engagements. These Chosen here stuck fighting Sigmar Sons, which is going to take a lot of time to chew through. Bit of a bad soul fire there, but which is definitely a saving grace for him right now. But it will be a long, long time before we're able to clear through this blob. In the meantime, over here, Kolek goes fisticuffs with Karl Franz, getting hit with Spirit Leech. He's popped fight or stand or die to stick around, but unfortunately it does wear off right there. Golmraz is popped, and Karl is in hot pursuit, looking to lay the smackdown on the Lord of the Storm. Guns in the meantime, though, were disrupted a bit by Hounds, who did sneak through there before the Knights laid the smackdown on them. Horsemen over here, popping shots at the Demigryph Knights, and with their decent AP, they've got 7 AP, I believe, per Javelin. They actually do some damage to these heavily armored Knights. 125 armor is no protection against that. Outriders do try to pour some fire into them, but this is not ideal. Outriders wasting their shots trying to screen out Horsemen is not good. Even if these Horsemen weren't doing anything right now, this is an opportunity. There's much more important things that need to be dealt with. These Chosen, you need that ammo for them. You need the ammo for Kolek. And Karl Franz isn't going to be able to carry that whole thing on his back. So, especially with no healing to support him. So the Outriders wasting their shots here on the Horsemen. Yes, my opponent gets a rout here, but it is a big misplay. Because in the meantime, the Chosen Blob, alongside Kolek, is laying the smack down on these troops. And you can see Karl Franz here getting clobbered. The Chosen coming in there swinging. They're of course going to be adding that monstrous 50 weapon strength to every hit, and Karl is really starting to feel the heat here, and he is getting staggered quite a bit actually by Kolek, so he's not taking as much damage as you'd think, but down to 1,000 HP, forced to run. And despite my opponent's efforts here with Soul Blight, it's not going to help too much. Now, Soul Blight will help the Flagellants do some damage here, but not quite enough, and you can see Silver Bullets compromised by the Marauders. Over here, Marauders overrunning the spear slowly but surely. They'll win in the long grind. And here, the Chosen just kind of grinding things out. And you can see they're proving their mettle. This fight is actually still cost-effective for the Chosen. The Chosen here is sitting on 34 models, clubbing it out with the Warrior Priest, the Great Swords, the Sigmar Sons. All these units going toe-to-toe with them, and they are grinding it out. Here in the meantime, Marauder Horsemen combined with the Marauders are chasing off the Outriders, so removing that big threat from play. These Marauder Horsemen dove into melee. One of their big perks is that they're quick and that they're decent in combat. So you throw them into a fight here against these handguns. That 24 charge bonus does some work, and you're able to run them off pretty quick. You can see those handguns routed smoothly. The good old lightning bolt there did a tiny bit of damage. Disappears. Not much to say there. Excuse me. Franz trying to sneak back into the fray here, but with his low HP, he really can't do much. Kolek could almost kill him in one shot, or actually probably could kill him in one shot. But at the same time, Kolek is pretty low too right now. So if Karl gets a good double tap diving in, he could potentially rout Kolek instantly. And you can see here he's going to dive in, try to smack Kolek, staggers him, drops him to 1100 HP, but Kolek is having none of that shiz, and he is going to turn around and look to smack down the Emperor. He knock him down to 16 HP. Some random pleb nearby gets the rest of the damage, and that is it for the brave Emperor. Collapsed beneath Deathwing's furry coat there. Warrior Priest did come in though, swing in, Hammer of Sigmar popped, chases off Kolek, so Kolek is now removed from play. You can see these Chosen finally did crack. They didn't win that fight against the Sigmar Sons and the Great Swords. It eventually was too much, especially when Empire Knights poured in, so yeah, all it took was like 2,500 gold worth of resources, and they did lose eventually. But now, there are 2 units of Great Swords left. I still have Horsemen online, whereas my opponent no longer has any missile play to chase the Horsemen off. All the Outriders were routed. The guns were run off, you can see over here. So my opponent has nothing really to stop these horsemen from pecking away at this. And honestly, the 2 chosen here could probably just grind it out. You can see these guys up to 2 chevrons. I think they started with 1, but still just showing how insane they can be. These chosen rally with 4 models, which you can see they gained a chevron as well, 102 kills, did some insane work there, and it's going to be the breaking point, a Pyrrhic victory for the Forces of Destruction. So going over the build here, would I recommend Chosen against Chaos? No, not really. I think if you're going to go for heavy metal infantry, then probably just go for Chaos Warriors, great weapons, or bring Chosen the shields, normal like a single unit as your anchor. I think 3 Chosen great weapons is a bit goofy for sure, and as you can see, they didn't necessarily pay for themselves. Some of them got stuck there in those crappy, grindy fights, where they just sat twiddling their thumbs, unable to really get good hits in. But for the ones that did, when they do get into that fight, they do grind rather well. 9,000 damage, 1,200 damage value, so almost paying for themselves. And when you consider that units tend to rout, and you don't just get the damage you're valued at, usually, that's pretty solid. 1,500, these guys more than paid for themselves in that fight. Just be able to outgrind all that Empire chaff and the Demigryph Knights, and ultimately help club down Karl Franz. That was huge. Marauders, they tried. They were disruptive. One of them did rather well. I believe this was the one that got on the silver bullets, though. Horsemen, of course, excellent as always. Always good to bring at least a handful of these guys. Horsemasters can be okay, though they're not as important against Empire. The main reason for that is because Empire Cav doesn't have as much range as, say, High Elf Cav, so you don't need that extra smidge of range. The armor doesn't tend to matter as much, and you don't need the better melee with Horsemasters. One of the important things about Horsemasters against, say, High Elves is that High Elf, Elite, and Reavers fight pretty damn well in melee. So having the extra punch on Horsemasters can help there, since they're very comparable to Elite and Reavers. Horsemen against Outriders, they'll beat Outriders, they'll beat Pistoliers in melee. So you don't really need that extra punch in CQC. They're adequate as they are. So yeah, all that. The Sorcerer here dropped that Penumbral Pendulum, did some damage to the handguns and silver bullets, though not as much as I had hoped, and then I didn't get another one off. I don't believe some of his spells are a little bit useful. Not too many great targets for Enfeebling Foe or Milkos Miasma. Ended up spamming Milkos Miasma that game. And then Cole like a champ here, 2,600. Most of that on Franz. Really did well. Now for my opponent here, going over the build, I do think it's a bit of a motley assortment. I would probably not bring Franz if I'm bringing a Deathcaster, swap him out for Boris. And if you are going to bring if you do want Franz, bring a Lifecaster. And honestly, Lifecaster plus Demigryph Blob is not a terrible choice against Empire or against Chaos. So you can cut out like one of these handguns here, or maybe cut out the I'd probably cut out both handguns if you're going to go with the Outriders. Unless you're going to go with this very static defensive build, in which case you can like double up handguns, cut the Outriders, and then get and maybe cut one of the spears, or downgrade the Greatswords to another Flagellant, and get yourself a second unit of Demigryph Knights with Halberds, Lifecaster. Boom, you've suddenly got a pretty nasty death ball going. Warrior Priest, I think, suffered a bit from being in the wrong fights, the wrong pockets. He started off the fight being near the Sigmar Sons, which is kind of a waste. Not the ideal unit for him to support, because they don't get leadership buffs, and they're not particularly good at killing heavy armored Chaos Infantry. If all you want is them to kill Marauders, they do that fine without help. You really wanted him supporting the Greatswords early to cleave through those Chosen, and he didn't really do that. So a little unfortunate there. But I do think he contributed a bit, especially with Benediction. His troops stuck around better than they would have normally. But ultimately, I think the biggest problem there, besides the lack of synergy in this build, was the Demigryph Halberds and the Outriders just not performing up to snuff. They didn't really get the ideal engagements. Demigryph spent the game chasing horsemen and trying to fight Chosen, who beat the crap out of them. Outriders spent the game being out of position and trying to take pot shots at Marauder horsemen, when really all that fire could have been focused on Kolek, who nearly died that game. So definitely misplay there on my opponent's part. Regardless, good game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I'll respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.